Michael Turner's life had become quiet, almost too quiet. His days were filled with the same routines: early mornings, silent breakfasts, long hours at the architecture firm, and peaceful but lonely evenings in his home just outside Seattle. It had been for years since his wife passed away, and though time softened the pain, it left behind a kind of emptiness he couldn't name. His daughter Emily was his only anchor. She was 20 now, in her second year of college, full of energy and always surrounded by friends. Her laughter had brought life back into the house that Friday afternoon. Michael came home early, hoping to spend the evening with his daughter. When he walked through the door, he heard voices, Emily's, and another softer one that sounded familiar. When he turned the corner, he froze. Sitting on the kitchen counter, smiling like she had never left, was Sophie Bennett. "Mr. Turner," she said with that bright, warm smile he remembered from years ago. "Sophie?" he said, surprised. "It's been ages." "It has," she replied, sliding down from the counter. "I'm back in town for a bit. Just moved back from Chicago." Emily grinned. "Sophie's staying here for a few days until she finds her own apartment." "You don't mind, right, Dad?" "Of course not," he said, though he felt a sudden, strange flutter in his chest. That evening, as the three of them ate dinner, Michael couldn't help noticing how much Sophie had changed. The last time he saw her, she was 17, a high school senior full of big dreams and reckless laughter. Now she was 24, calm and confident, with a quiet glow about her. The way she carried herself was different, poised, almost graceful. She talked about her years in Chicago, her design degree, her short stint at an interior firm, and how she missed the slower pace of the Pacific Northwest. Michael listened with genuine interest, though a part of him felt uneasy about how icily her presence filled the room. She laughed at his jokes, remembered details from her teenage years, and asked questions about his life with a maturity that surprised him. For a moment, he forgot she was once just Emily's friend. Later that night, when Emily went out with other friends, Sophie stayed back, helping him clean the dishes. "You've kept the house almost exactly the same," she said, glancing around the kitchen. "It feels nostalgic." He smiled faintly. "I'm not much for change, I guess." She tilted her head. "Sometimes change is what we need." There was something in the way she said it, not flirtatious, but deeply reflective. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Michael looked away first, suddenly aware of the silence between them. After Sophie went to bed in the guest room, Michael sat in his study, staring out at the quiet night. He told himself not to think too much. She was just Emily's friend, a guest. Yet something about her presence stirred an ache he hadn't felt in years, an ache that wasn't entirely comfortable, but not unwelcome either. The next morning, Sophie joined him in the kitchen early, her hair loosely tied, a mug of coffee in her hands. "You're up early," she said, smiling. "Old habits," he replied. "Can't seem to sleep in anymore." They talked easily like old friends. She told him about her struggles in Chicago, how city life had drained her, how she longed for quieter days. He listened, really listened, and realized how good it felt to have someone understand the loneliness he'd learned to hide. When Emily came down later, she noticed the two of them laughing over something trivial. "Wow," she said teasingly. "You two are getting along pretty well." Michael smiled awkwardly, brushing it off. But Sophie didn't seem bothered. She just grinned and said, "Your dad's actually funny once he warms up." The weekend passed quickly. Sophie helped Emily reorganize her room, cooked dinner with them, and joined Michael for a few evening walks around the neighborhood. Each time their conversations grew a little deeper. She asked about his late wife, how he handled loss, how he raised Emily alone, how he managed to keep so calm through everything. He wasn't used to being seen that way, like a person with stories instead of just a father. One evening, while Emily was studying at a friend's house, Sophie sat with him on the porch. The rain had just stopped, and the air smelled of wet cedar and earth. "I used to come here all the time," she said quietly, "back when Emily's mom was alive. She used to make hot cocoa for us after school." Michael nodded, his chest tightening at the memory. "She liked having you around. Said you brought sunshine into the house." Sophie looked at him then, her eyes soft. And you never changed. Always steady, always kind. Even when things were hard. He looked at her for a long moment, unsure how to respond. She smiled faintly and looked away, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Chicago changed me, she said. It taught me that not everyone has the heart you do. Michael. It was the first time she said his name, and for some reason, it echoed inside him that night after she went to bed. Michael found himself thinking about the way she'd said it. He felt ridiculous, too old to be affected by something so small. Yet there was no denying that Sophie's presence had unsettled something deep within him. Over the next few days, he tried to keep his distance, but it wasn't easy. Sophie was everywhere, humming in the kitchen, working on her laptop in the living room, or sitting quietly on the porch sketching. Every time he saw her, the same thought crept in. She didn't belong to the world of kids anymore. She was a woman now, thoughtful and beautiful in a way that wasn't loud, but deeply graceful. Then one afternoon, when Emily went to class, Michael came home early from work to find Sophie alone. She was in the dining room, rearranging furniture. "You're home early," she said, smiling. "I hope you don't mind. I was trying to see how your living room would look if it were more open." He laughed. "You've turned my house into a design project." "Just a little," she said. "You need some life in here." He watched as she moved a chair, her focus intense, her movements confident. It struck him how easily she brought warmth into a space. He helped her lift a small table, and when their hands brushed for a second, he felt a sudden current, fleeting but powerful. They both froze. She looked up at him, eyes wide, and for a moment, the air between them thickened with something neither wanted to name. Then she laughed nervously and stepped back. "I guess I got carried away." Michael forced a small smile. "It's fine. I needed a change anyway." That night, Emily called to say she was staying with a friend. Michael found himself alone again with Sophie, and with the growing awareness that something was changing. They ate dinner quietly, both avoiding the unspoken tension. But when she thanked him for letting her stay, saying softly, "You've made me feel at home again," his heart stirred in a way it hadn't in years. After she went upstairs, he sat in the living room long after midnight, staring at the space she had rearranged. Everything looked slightly different, lighter somehow. But it wasn't just the furniture. It was him. Something inside him had shifted too. He didn't know where this story was heading, only that it had already begun. The following days unfolded quietly, yet something unspoken hovered between Michael and Sophie. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there in the pauses of their conversations, in the shared glances that lingered a second too long. Michael noticed himself growing aware of the smallest things, the sound of her laughter, light scent of her perfume, the way she'd smile when she caught him looking thoughtful. He didn't understand why he cared so much, but he did. Sophie, on the other hand, seemed to sense the tension too, though she never mentioned it. She carried herself with calm warmth, acting like nothing had changed. She'd wake early, make coffee for them both, and ask him about his work. Sometimes she'd sit across from him at the dining table, working on her laptop, lost in concentration. He admired her discipline, how she seemed focused on building a new chapter in her life. One afternoon, Emily came home, bursting through the door with excitement. "Dad, Sophie found a job. She's joining an interior design company downtown." Michael smiled. "That's great news, Sophie. Congratulations." Sophie grinned. "Thank you. It's a small firm, but they liked my work. I start next week." He felt proud of her, though part of him realized her new job meant she'd soon move out. That thought sat heavier on him than he wanted to admit. The week passed in a blur. Sophie spent her evenings preparing for her job, browsing through designs, and sharing ideas with Michael. They often sat together after dinner, talking about art, work, and life. She'd ask for his advice, and he'd listen, fascinated by how her mind worked. One evening, Emily stayed late at the campus library, and Michael found himself again alone with Sophie. She was sketching something at the dining table, her brow furrowed in focus. Curious, he walked over. "What are you working on?" "Just a layout for the firm's client project," she said without looking up. They want a modern but warm style. I'm struggling with a lighting arrangement. He sat beside her and looked at her sketch. You're good at this, he said. You have a sense of balance that feels natural. She looked at him, surprised. You really think so? Absolutely, he said. You see things in a way most people miss. She smiled softly, a quiet appreciation in her eyes. You always say things that stay with me, Michael. The way she said his name again made something stir inside him, not excitement, but a deep human warmth he hadn't felt in years. It reminded him that he was still alive, still capable of connection. That night, after she went upstairs, he sat in the same spot, staring at her sketches. Her handwriting, her little notes, everything had a sense of life and purpose. He admired that about her, how she moved forward despite uncertainty. A few days later, Sophie started her new job. The house felt quieter without her during the day, and Michael noticed the difference immediately. He'd come home from work, and the rooms would feel emptier. Even Emily commented one evening, "You miss Sophie, don't you, Dad?" He smiled awkwardly. "She brings a lot of energy, that's all." Emily nodded. "She does. She's like family." Those words lingered in his mind. Family. He wanted to think of Sophie that way, as part of their family, but the truth was more complicated. There was admiration, respect, and something else he didn't want to name. A week later, on a rainy Thursday evening, Sophie came home looking tired. She kicked off her shoes, smiled weakly, and said, "Work's been crazy this week." Michael poured her a cup of tea. "Then tonight, you rest. Sit down." She laughed. "You sound like my dad." "Maybe I am getting old," he said jokingly. She looked at him for a moment, her expression soft. "You don't seem old to me, Michael. You seem ... steady. The kind of person people trust." There was sincerity in her voice that caught him off guard. He smiled but said nothing, afraid that words might ruin the moment. Over the next few days, their friendship grew stronger. They didn't talk about feelings, but their connection deepened in small ways. Shared dinners, quiet laughter, moments of comfortable silence. Sometimes Emily would tease them, saying they acted like an old married couple, and they'd both laugh it off. But each time, Michael's heart would skip. Just a little. Then came the evening that changed everything. Emily had gone on a weekend trip with her college friends. It was just Michael and Sophie at home. They spent most of the day fixing the garden and cleaning the patio. By the time the sun went down, they were both exhausted. "Pizza?" she asked, sitting on the porch steps. "Sure," he said. They ordered food, sat outside, and watched the rain drizzle softly over the street. The lights from the houses reflected off the wet pavement, painting the neighborhood in gold and gray dots. Sophie leaned back, closing her eyes. "It feels peaceful here, like nothing bad can touch you." Michael nodded. "That's what I love about this house. It's quiet, safe." She looked at him then, her expression thoughtful. "You built a good life, Michael. Even after everything you went through, you stayed kind. That's rare." He turned toward her, his heart tightening. "It wasn't easy," he said quietly. "There were years when I didn't think I could keep going. But then Emily needed me. That kept me steady." She smiled gently. "You've done more than just stay steady. You've inspired people, even me." The rain grew heavier and they moved under the porch roof. For a long moment, they just sat there, listening to the rain. Sophie broke the silence. "You know, when I was younger, I used to think you were the perfect dad, the kind every kid wished they had. You were always calm, never raised your voice. I didn't realize back then how much strength that takes." Her words hit him harder than he expected. "Strength comes from the people around us," he said softly, "and sometimes from the people we least expect." Their eyes met, and neither of them looked away. The moment stretched, quiet, delicate, full of meaning that didn't need to be spoken. Then Sophie smiled faintly, breaking the spell. "I'm glad I came back," she whispered. "This place, it feels like home again." Michael nodded, his throat tight. "I'm glad you did too." That night, he lay awake for a long time, thinking about her words. He knew he was treading dangerous emotional ground, not because anything wrong had happened, but because his heart was slowly awakening in a way he hadn't planned. The next morning, Sophie acted as though nothing had changed. She was cheerful, humming as she made breakfast. Michael followed her lead, grateful for her composure. But the truth was, both of them knew something had shifted quietly, deeply, unavoidably. Days turned into weeks, okay? And Sophie continued living with them until she found her own apartment. The day she came to tell him she'd signed the lease, Michael felt both proud and unexpectedly sad. "That's wonderful," he said, forcing a smile. She nodded, smiling faintly. "It's not far. Just a few blocks away. You'll still see me around. I'll hold you to that," he said. She looked at him for a long second, as though trying to say something else, but then changed her mind. "Thank you, Michael," she said softly, "for everything. You've given me more kindness than I deserve." He wanted to tell her she deserved every bit of it, that her presence had given his life color again. But he stayed silent that evening. As she packed her last box, he stood by the door, unsure of what to say. When she hugged him goodbye, it felt both final and unfinished. "I'll see you soon," she said, smiling. And then she was gone. That night, the house felt unbearably quiet. Emily came home later and asked, "Dad, are you okay?" He nodded, but his heart felt heavy. He told himself it was normal. People come and go, but deep down, he knew something had changed forever. Sophie had brought something back into his life that he hadn't realized he'd lost the courage to feel again. And though she was gone, her presence lingered in every corner of the house, in the laughter that once filled the air, and in the warmth that still lingered on the porch where they watched the rain. He didn't regret a thing, because sometimes the people who enter our lives unexpectedly are the ones who remind us what it means to be alive. Months had passed since Sophie moved into her new apartment, and life in Michael's house had slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. Emily had her usual energy back, busy with college projects and friends. Michael still went to work every morning, made dinner at the same time, and sat on the same porch in the evenings. Yet the house felt different. Not empty, but changed. Some evenings, when the light fell softly through the curtains, he caught himself glancing toward the chair Sophie used to sit in. He missed her. He missed her laughter that filled the air like sunlight, the way she brought warmth even on the dullest days. It wasn't something he could explain to anyone, not even to himself fully. It wasn't love, at least not the kind people talk about. It was gratitude mixed with quiet affection, the kind that grows between two souls who've unknowingly helped each other heal. One Saturday morning, Michael received a text. It was from Sophie. "Hey, I'm in the neighborhood. Can I stop by?" His heart lifted. He quickly replied, "Of course. You're always welcome." When she arrived, she looked different, more confident, more mature, like someone who had finally found her place in the world. Her hair was shorter and her eyes sparkled with the calm of someone who'd grown through experience. "Wow," Michael said with a smile. "You look happy?" She laughed softly. "I am. Work's been good, and I'm learning a lot." She paused, glancing around. "But this place still feels like home." They talked for hours about her job, her new coworkers, and the projects she was designing. Emily joined in when she came home, and the house once again filled with that familiar laughter Michael had missed so much. When Sophie left that evening, she hugged them both. "You two will always be family to me," she said warmly. Her words stayed with Michael long after she was gone. Family. That was the right word for what they had become. Not something romantic or forbidden, but something deeper, built on care and trust. Yet deep down, he still felt something unresolved. Over the next few months, Sophie visited often. Sometimes she'd drop by for dinner, other times just to share a coffee. She brought new energy each time, telling stories from her workplace and talking about her dreams. Michael listened with quiet admiration, proud of the woman she was becoming. One evening, she invited him and Emily to her apartment. You both have to see my place now that I've made it cozy, she insisted. When they arrived, her apartment reflected her personality. Warm colors, soft lighting, everything simple yet full of life. Michael looked around and smiled. You've done an amazing job. Thank you, she said, her eyes glowing with pride. You helped me believe I could do this. They had dinner, laughed, and talked until late. Before they left, Sophie walked Michael to the door. You know, she said quietly, I used to think I was just a guest in your home, but you made me feel like I belonged. I'll never forget that. Michael's throat tightened. You'll always have a place there, he replied softly. Always. As months went by, life moved forward. Emily graduated from college and started working in another city, visiting home only occasionally. Michael, now in his 50s, adjusted to the silence of an empty house again. Yet, he no longer felt lonely. Sophie had taught him something valuable. That connection didn't end when someone left your home. It lived on in the small ways they changed you. Then, one autumn afternoon, Sophie called him out of the blue. Michael, can we talk? Her voice sounded nervous. Of course, he said. Is everything okay? I just need someone to listen. Can I come over? When she arrived, she seemed troubled. She sat down on the porch, just like old times, and took a deep breath. I made a mistake at work, she confessed. A client blamed me for something that wasn't entirely my fault. I might lose my position. Michael listened quietly, offering her tea like he always used to. You're strong, Sophie. You've built yourself up before. You'll do it again. She looked at him, eyes teary. I'm tired, Michael. I keep trying to be perfect, but I'm scared to fail. He leaned forward, his tone gentle but firm. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep moving forward. People who care about you don't love your perfection. They love your effort. For a moment, she just looked at him. You always know what to say, she whispered. He smiled softly. That's because I've made enough mistakes to understand what matters. She laughed through her tears, and in that laughter, the tension broke. The world outside was quiet, filled with the smell of autumn leaves. For a long time, they sat together, not as a man and a young woman with unspoken history, but as two people who understood each other's hearts. Weeks passed, and Sophie resolved her problem at work. She was offered a new project, one that involved traveling to another city for several months. When she told Michael, his heart sank, though he masked it with a proud smile. That's amazing, Sophie. You deserve it, he said sincerely. She smiled faintly. I'll miss this porch. It's seen all my breakdowns and recoveries. He chuckled. It'll always be here, waiting for you. Before she left town, she came by one last time. She brought a small gift, a framed drawing of his house, hand-sketched with delicate details. At the bottom, she had written, for the man who gave me a home when I needed one. Michael was moved beyond words. This is beautiful, he said quietly. Sophie smiled. It's not just your house. It's where I learned what kindness looks like. When she hugged him goodbye, it felt different this time, peaceful, complete. There was no tension, no longing. Just gratitude, mutual respect, and quiet affection that didn't need to be explained. After she left, Michael placed the drawing on the mantel. Each morning, as he drank his coffee, he looked at it and smiled. Life had come full circle. He had once been the one to offer support, and now he realized he'd received just as much in return. Years went by. Emily got married, and Sophie eventually opened her own design studio. They all stayed in touch, visiting each other from time to time. Every holiday season, Sophie would send Michael a handwritten card. One year, it read, Your wisdom still guides me, even when you're not there. Thank you for being my safe place. Michael smiled every time he read it. He had long accepted that what they shared wasn't a story of forbidden love, but of emotional healing to people from different generations who had crossed paths at the right time and reminded each other how to live again. One spring evening, years later, he sat on the same porch where it all began. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the sound of distant laughter from a family walking by. He thought about everything, the loneliness after his wife passed, Emily growing up. Sophie's laughter echoing through the house. I felt a deep sense of peace. He realized that not every powerful story ends with romance. Some end with understanding, with quiet companionship, with a kind of love that doesn't need labels or confessions. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he whispered to himself, I didn't lose her. I just helped her find her wings. Inside, the framed sketch still hung on the wall, a symbol of a bond that had changed them both forever. And as the night settled, Michael smiled, knowing that sometimes the most meaningful relationships in life are the ones that never needed to be defined, just felt